So my talk this afternoon is all based on the project work that I've been conducting over the past 2 years, and it's titled Risk Management through Soil Moisture Monitoring, and certainly there was a couple of mentions to risk management in the sessions this morning. But previous to starting this dryland project, I was running an irrigation scheduling project in northern Victoria with significant investments in the delivery of water through that irrigation district and also on-farm investment. So we had a range of soil moisture monitoring devices out on those farms and come up with a mixture of results, but some of them were really good. And this is just a photo of a farmer at Kingupna who got great results out of using this type of technology, and to the point where he's actually invested and bought additional probes, as he found that one spot, just measuring one soil type and one crop type, wasn't enough. So he's now expanded that out. So based on that sort of knowledge, we're looking to extend it out into the dryland environment. Obviously, dryland croppers have always had to deal with seasonal variability, and we're certainly getting some trends that we might get some climate variability in the future. So in recent history, we've certainly seen some extremes, and certainly through this project period in the last 2 years, we've seen some very wet times and some pretty dry times. So just associated with that, we're just looking to work with some farmers to just determine if they can manage their risk a bit better according to measured soil moisture levels. So looking to potentially minimise the losses in the really dry years, but looking to capitalise on those better years as well and improve their productivity levels. We have gone out and certainly done some surveys and assessments of farmers of whether they're actually assessing soil moisture. We found that a lot of them are, but found that it was generally pretty subjective. A lot of them were just using simply just rainfall records, or looking at a crop condition and the sort of the way the plant was looking, so all pretty subjective there. We did find that they're actually getting a feel of the soil at times, but they were probably more using just shovel depth at that, and with that we've certainly in some case studies we're looking at, they certainly were identifying where they'd got those estimations wrong, that seemed like it was wet on top, but down below it was quite dry. And one of the key findings we've found from using these moisture probes is the amount of water, soil water, that a plant can actually use through that spring period. So get those estimations wrong, you can have some big consequences. Also working with some agronomists and some good farmers. They've certainly been looking to assess deep soil moisture, so with the use of push probes, and also using soil test results from the start of the season, where you get that volumetric measure of the mils of moisture in that profile. So they're looking at the deep soil moistures, which is great, but they're spot measurements. So we're just thinking that there's potential to measure soil moisture better with the use of the technology of moisture probes. In terms of the project, we've got nine sites identified through the recognised cropping areas through Victoria. There's the locations there on the map of Victoria, and we've just recently added 2 more sites in Oyen and Birchip to work with those cropping groups in spring last year. In terms of the sites, there's at the time not really much to look at except for a logging device, a telemetry device there on the fence line, a rainfall or tipping bucket there. And that's pretty much basically what you can see from above the ground, but certainly below the ground is where it's all happening. So we've got the soil moisture probe, the capacitance probe in the ground there, and the real strength of using the probes is to have them in the ground for as long as possible. So we've actually positioned that down 25 centimetres, so the first sensor is 30 centimetres, and that's safely out of the way of any management practice on the farm. So just doing a scoping study, so associated with all those sites, we've got some farmer focus groups, and we've posed questions to them, how important are soil moisture levels when considering cropping decisions on their farm. And the 2 ones that really stood out were the identifying the crop type. They changed crop type according to soil moisture levels, and also in-crop inputs. And that's what I'll really look to focus in on the talk this afternoon. And just, you really do need to know your client's requirements as well, because there are some subtle differences between high and low fall areas. Where they've got, well, farmers in the higher rainfall areas, they're more confident in getting yields on a whole range of crops. So they're more likely to plant crop types based on best management practice with rotations, but really looking to adjust their crop inputs throughout the season with strategic inputs of nitrogen, whereas those low rainfall areas, they're certainly more subjective to changing crop types according to moisture levels. So in terms of the basics of how to interpret soil moisture data, I've just got an example here. This is the monitoring site from Uinmite, which is near Dookie and Tungamar. We've got the date sequence down below there, and the soil water content on this axis here. And just what I was looking to highlight here are the changes. So when you see a rapid spike up, that's just due to a rainfall event, so that's increasing the soil water content value at that time. And then when you correspondingly see a decrease in the soil water content, that's the plant actively taking up the soil moisture. So we're just looking at trend lines basically, and then you can get these flat line periods as well. That's just indicating there's no change in the soil water content in that measured zone at that time. This line actually represents all the 8 sensors we've got positioned in the ground, so it's an overview of the soil moisture. And knowing that the first sensor is actually at 30 centimetres, it's a summed line from 30 centimetres down to a metre. This is certainly one of the key learnings we've identified to date, is just the huge drawdown in soil moisture reserves that a big crop can actually do through that spring period. And this is, the green zone is actually where we've identified there's readily available water for that plant to use. And coming from a relatively full profile at the end of August, it's rapidly depleted that through that period of time. That flat line period there, can anyone identify a reason why that may have occurred? Just there, that flat line period after that rainfall event?
Moisture at surface.
Yeah, that's right. So we're looking at what the changes in soil moisture are in that measured zone. So with that significant rainfall event that we had there just before Grand Final Day in 2011, the plant is looking to use the moisture from its easiest source point. So it's when that rainfall has fallen, the plant has gone from using moisture from down deep, from below 30 centimetres, to then starting to use it from the top horizon, so from 0 to 30. Then once it's depleted, so once you've gone past that period point, it then starts to take it from down below again. So that rainfall event was quite significant in delaying the onset of use of deep soil moisture. Now, just in terms of the decision making that we saw with the site at Raywood in Central Victoria this year, this is again just an overview of the year with the date sequence down below, the soil water content on that axis, and the blue indicates the rainfall events. It had a really good crop in 2011, really depleted its soil moisture reserves even after the flood that had occurred early in 2011. So if you assume that there's still going to be moisture left, that's where the moisture probes can really play a big part. That was a good crop, and it did draw down a lot of moisture. Luckily, at the end of February, early March, we got that refill point from that autumn rain. There's about 50 mil that fell in that point. The soil was quite dry, so we actually did see some preferential flow, so the soil was certainly cracked and it did infiltrate down deep. And then over this period of time, it sort of equalised. So the point of soil that we're measuring soil water for is quite small, and if it's drier outside that measured zone, it'll then equalise. What's interesting with the dryland soil moisture probes, at times there's not a lot that you can see happening in that measured zone, and that's certainly what's happening here. But at this point of time, in terms of decision making, the farmer is quite confident there's a good soil moisture reserves down below, so he's keen to sow by the calendar, get that crop in, hopefully it rains, gets it struck, and then it can start to grow and start to tap into that resource down below. Obviously the plant is just developing there, just using the soil moisture from the 0 to 30 centimetre. There's no change in the soil water content. But through July we do get that significant rain, 50 mil through that month. It did actually boost our soil moisture reserves. And at that time the crop had got past Z31, so there was a strategic application of nitrogen at that point. And after that, sort of predictions of spring rainfall were not optimistic, and there wasn't a lot of rainfall that did fall on that site after that, so there was limited opportunities then to put on nitrogen, but there was one, just a bit of a top-up one, a small amount of 9 units, middle of September. But again, we're seeing that big drawdown in soil moisture reserves through that spring period. And then just looking at the individual sensors, this is a good way of, the previous graph is an overview. This is a good way of getting the detail of finding out actually what's happening. We can see with that July rainfall, it actually boosted the soil moisture levels at depth, so 60, 70, 80 centimetres. We know that the water has actually infiltrated down that deep with those rainfall events through that period of time. And then as we move through spring, once the top horizon has been depleted of moisture, it then starts to take it from the 30 and 40 centimetre mark. Then it's taking it from down deep as these areas really do reach their crop level limits, as there's no change in that soil water content. And to the point where we're seeing, you know, good moisture extraction from down deep through late October with that crop. Quickly just looking at some yields from the yield map, and some test strips were actually done on this paddock. So with that nitrogen application at Z31, 27 units, the farmer did put on some double rates and a 0 rate just to see what the effect was going to be, and it was quite evident that by increasing that nitrogen there was a good yield improvement. So just looking at the potential issues, with the project we've only really, it's been here for 2 years, so we've examined moisture extraction from mainly cereal crops at this stage, so we're still to examine the different patterns that may occur with different crop types. We know we're only measuring quite a micro area, and we're looking to use that information to apply it to paddock scale, so that's just something to be aware of. But a real strength is that that side is continually logged versus a measurement that you might do randomly and just in a small spot during the year with a push probe. Our focus is on looking at the deep soil moisture levels, so we've certainly got that blind spot of from 0 to 30 centimetres. And as you can, the previous slide showed with the yield map, you do get variations across different soil types, but with the farmers we're just saying, choose a soil type that's most common on your farm, as representative as possible, and then that becomes your reference point, and you can sort of work plus or minus on production units from that. And just in conclusion, the real strength of the data so far is just showing the comparison of the data years to date. So comparing 2011 to 2012 and the actual impact that had. Most sites are now getting a pretty good indication of crop upper and lower limits. We've been pretty fortunate to have some wet periods, especially through summer, which have refilled the profile, and probably unfortunately we've had some dry winters and springs, so it's dropped it down to potential crop level limits, but it gives you the area of where the plant can access water from. Hopefully you get a better spring this season. And just in terms of the decision making, soil moisture is obviously one. There's a whole other factors that go into play with that, and Tim will touch on those. And just all this information is available on the internet, and that's just a real strength. Everyone's got time constraints, especially during the growing season, so if you've got the ability to log on the internet, look at this data at your own time, that's a real strength than having to go out and do multiple samples across paddocks. So it's just a time efficient way to build knowledge. Thank you.